I have Lucas Vebber from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. I am so grateful for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We rely on you guys to do a lot of things that our legislature and, frankly, our Supreme Court should do, but refuse. Lucas, thank you for joining me on the show. Voter roll errors in Wisconsin. My goodness. We have a court case in Waukesha that says you need to put the voter rolls against the SAVE database, and the response from the Attorney General was, nah, I think we're going to fight you guys instead. This is a whole different can of worms. These are errors that Will has actually found on the voter rolls. Never mind, we haven't even run it against an illegal alien database. So what did you guys find out, and how did you get the information?
Yeah, so federal law requires every single state to maintain this centralized voter registration list. As part of that law, the state agencies are required to coordinate databases across the agencies. So that means for a state like Wisconsin, they're required to check their state voter registration database against other state databases to make sure that the information is accurate. DOJ sent a letter to the state last summer that basically asked them how they were complying with this law. The state kind of evasively responded, and they said, hey, if you're filing an online application, we'll instantly check that against the DMV database. But if you're going to file a paper application, we'll use a separate process. They never explained what that separate process was. So we submitted a public records request asking them for any records of discrepancies between the voter registration records and the other state databases, and we found out that there's about 40,000 errors, discrepancies right now in our state active voter registration list.
Okay, so that's based on checking against other states' databases. You don't have information from the DOT. We were told, by the way, that the DOT and WEC couldn't share information because privacy or something like that. Remember?
Yeah, we know that the WEC will instantly, if you apply online, the systems are linked, so they'll verify your driver's license data against the state driver's license database. If there's a discrepancy there, they won't let you register to vote online.
Okay.
But we know that in Wisconsin, you can also register to vote via paper, right? You can submit a paper application to vote. And then we also know now here, as of October, there's about 40,000 discrepancies. Now, these could be anything from something totally innocuous. Maybe it's a typo in a name. Maybe it's a shortened name like Pat instead of Patrick. But we don't know because WEC won't give us any of that data, so we can't actually verify how any of these discrepancies came to be or whether any of these people actually voted or not.
Okay, we have 40,000 discrepancies, and that number hanging out there, 40,000 discrepancies in the voter registration list in Wisconsin. And WEC doesn't want to help you clear it up. So we are now with 40,000 is hanging in the air like a cartoon balloon. That makes Wisconsin sound like its system is not secure for making sure that only the right people are voting. Lucas, that's what WEC is screaming. It's putting up a big neon sign saying no voter integrity here. We have 40,000 errors. And some of these errors are pretty significant, but like you say, many of them may just mean that, the name doesn't match and it's Vicki, not Victoria or something like that, right? We have no way of knowing. How do the errors break down?
Yeah, we don't have any way of knowing exactly which is which, but we know that there's, some of the errors could be a driver's license number doesn't match. I think there's about 11,000 of those. There's about 20,000 names that don't match specifically. Some of them, it's a name and date of birth don't match. So, but again,
there's
we don't know.
Matches, yeah. These are bad.
Exactly. We know the numbers, but we don't know who these individuals are because WEC won't provide us that data. And we also know that WEC's taking no actions on their end to clean up the voter rolls.
So that's the thing is that then Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty says, okay, these are the people who it was an innocuous mistake. It was a typo. We're going to leave those people alone. And then you go back and you say, get rid of these other ones. These are obviously bad registrations. And that they seem to be dug in on that. They don't want to get rid of bad registrations. This isn't the first time Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty has taken a whack at bad registrations. And it seems like we just cannot get WEC to do it.
Yeah, we've certainly asked them repeatedly to do so, and that was part of what the USDOJ letter last summer to WEC was. They were trying to figure out how exactly WEC is complying with federal law which requires them to maintain the voter registration list here in Wisconsin. And, WEC's response at that time was evasive. We sent a follow-up letter back in August to the USDOJ that we put out publicly that just, raised some follow-up issues. And then as part of that, we circled back on this to figure out if they were even doing anything on this list, because as part of WEC's response, as I said, they explained their process for electronic registration, but all they told the DOJ was, and we also use a separate process for these paper registrations. They never explained what that process was or how they actually check that the data is verified.
So we don't know. We're speculating. They're checking against another state's database. They might not be. They might be doing something totally different in a separate process, which should not be non-transparent. Why isn't this made available, just to the public on how this process works? I mean, we already know that if I want to get the voter registration list, I got to pay a lot of money to do it. And so it is impossible, almost impossible, to, sort of be the watchdogs out there, the sort of crowdsourced watchdogs of what's going bad, so that WEC could say, thank you for doing the work we should have been doing. We will take care of that immediately. It seems like they don't want us to know. And then they'll say things like, oh, it was just a typo. They'll say it's probably just typos, but we don't know. What's the risk of this? What's the risk of having 40,000 no matches, some of which might be okay, but some of which might be bad, on our voter registration list?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly even if one person votes who wasn't legally authorized to be registered to vote, that's a problem. And we don't know because we can't verify this information, and WEC won't let us. And that's the real problem here, is that they kind of just bury their head in the sand. Anytime you point out anything that they're doing that is unlawful or could use a lot more transparency, WEC just buries their head in the sand and says, nope, nothing to see here. We don't want anything to do with it.
And we're crazy, right? We're crazy because we're worried about this stuff. That makes us nuts. What really drives me crazy, though, about being accused of being crazy is that it's also on the Republican side. Unfortunately, we just don't get a lot of attention. It's almost like, they've taken up this move on kind of mentality. I'm concerned about this no record of DL number. That's how many people are we talking about there? If you are running it against a driver's license and it doesn't show up, and that's your Wisconsin voter ID, it's a state ID or it's a driver's license, shows up at the DOT when you look someone up.
Yeah,
we're talking thousands of those.
Yeah, it's 11,000, over 11,000 people on the active voter registration list have provided a driver's license number that doesn't match with anything in the DMV.
See, now that's
a real problem.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Okay, you got your license. You're writing it down. You're not going to get 11,000, bad transcriptions. I just don't. I don't buy. So there's no record. Go ahead, please. We first flagged this problem for WEC about 5 years ago after the 2020 election. As part of our report, we flagged this as an issue. Back then, there were about 4,800 or so of these records, and now we're at 11,000. So that it's more than doubled in the past 4 years. The number of active voter registrations who don't have a valid driver's license number that doesn't match a valid driver's license number in the system. That's a real problem. And, doubling over 5 years is significant, and we just don't know what WEC's doing about it. No, and they're not doing anything about it. Name and date of birth does not match. Okay, that's fraudulent. Just get rid of those people. Name and date of birth does not match. Let's see, that looks like it's doubled, 2.5 times bigger than it was before.
It was, yeah.
But if name and date of birth do not match, that person's lying. Okay, one of those things is going to match. It's gonna. You don't get your name and your date of birth wrong. I'm sorry. You don't transcribe those incorrectly. That's it. It's statistically, so unlikely as to almost be impossible that someone keying it in or whatever is going to key it in wrong on name and date of birth. You're just not going to mess that up that bad. Get the DOJ making the threats. Under what penalty? It sounds like the DOJ hasn't done much. You've picked up the ball, but they're the people with the hammer, not Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty.
Yeah, so USDOJ, thankfully, has been interested in this, not only in Wisconsin, but nationwide. It's part of their election integrity efforts. So they've sort of just begun this investigation into Wisconsin. We've flagged this as an issue that we're hoping they will investigate further because, obviously, if you're the United States Department of Justice, they have significantly more tools in their toolbox than we do. And, once the USDOJ starts investigating you, that's a serious issue that I think everybody can agree needs to be taken care of quickly. So
no, not
we've
here.
asked USDOJ to look into this.
No, not with Josh Call and Tony Evers, who just think that, we're just going to ignore the DOJ. We'll just ignore everything. We'll ignore the law. My last question for you is, a Waukesha judge said, run the voter registration against the SAVE database. The SAVE database is non-citizens who have made claims for social service benefits. And they're saying, it's just too hard. So you've got Josh Call, who wants to be Attorney General again, who's going to appeal on behalf of WAC and say, no, we're not going to do it. It's too hard. But apparently they are able to run our voter registration database again, or voter registration list against other databases. It seems like that we're getting a whole lot of BS coming out of WAC just to keep people distracted.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. I think I saw news this week that the state of Texas recently was able to run their voter registration list against it. There were thousands of unlawful voters there, and I think we certainly should be doing the same here.
Yeah, no special effort was made by Texas, by the way, except we're just going to run cross-check our list against their list, which apparently we already can do here in Wisconsin. But when it comes to the SAVE database, we're not supposed to cross-check that list either. And in the meantime, none of us out here are supposed to have any real knowledge about what's going on. And people wonder why we question the voter integrity in the state of Wisconsin. Next steps, Lucas. What are your next steps?
Next steps, well, like we said, we just brought this to the USDOJ attention. We're hoping that USDOJ follows up on their initial letter to WAC this past summer and begins the full-on investigatory process here and gets us some answers that will eventually spur WAC to action to clean up these voter rolls. I
really appreciate the time. And, this is something you guys didn't have to do, and I appreciate the effort that Will made on behalf of us. Thanks again for coming on the program.
Great. Thanks for having me, Vicki.
Lucas Vebber from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We will take a quick break on the Vicki McKenna Show.